Our last speaker will be Jennifer Hawkins. Jenny and her husband John operate a mixed irrigation enterprise in the Southern Riverina, which includes rice, canola, winter cereals, feedlot, beef cattle and prime lamb production. Jenny was a 2009 Nuffield Scholarship recipient, and overseas she studied emissions trading and methods for calculating greenhouse gas emissions and storage on farm. She visited Canada, the US and China to investigate recording and compliance methods that farmers can use to measure their greenhouse gas emissions and farm management options to reduce emissions or improve carbon sequestration. Please welcome Jenny.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Catchment Management for having me here today. I'm going to tell you today about our story, or Jack's and my story, and tell you and move a little bit on and touch on some of the areas of my Nuffield, but also our farm and some of the other work that I do. This is our farm. I come from Finley in southern New South Wales, and our soils are basing self-mulching clay soils. They're good soils. It's a good farm. It's all irrigation. Our rainfall is not certainly in the realms of what we would be liking for some of the things that I've witnessed today, but we do actually also have 2,023 megalitres entitlement on our place as well, so we're putting some water on top of that. We have a gravity-fed irrigation system, which is all lasered and all got intricate drainage, on-farm drainage. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the drainage system a bit later on. But this is a very, very simplistic view and little diagram of putting into my sort of way what we do. And it sort of sums up about what Jack and I have been thinking. I must say something first, is that I'm not an agronomist or a scientist or anything like that, which I found quite confronting even when I was doing my Nuffield stuff. But we consider soils being really, really fundamental to what we do. That's our basic infrastructure. It's not just our environmental infrastructure, it's our production system infrastructure as well. And we've found in a pretty quick way, and I'm not going to go on about it, that testing is really important. And probably the last 10 years have really pushed us on this. We didn't do as much testing before. When we applied things, what we did, both in our animal systems and also our cropping program. So I suppose I've said it all when I say that if we don't have it working underneath the ground, then we won't see the results above the ground. It's pretty simplistic. Our soil biology decisions at Springfield include looking at just, I suppose, the long term. We have been very reactionary in the drought. In the initial stages of the drought, we were quite reactionary. We sort of took a big deep breath, Jack and I, about the second or third year in, and thought, okay, this is hanging around a bit longer than we would have liked. We sat down and actually really developed a plan. We destocked. We actually leased a place down in Penshurst near Hamilton and completely destocked from the place at Springfield. And that was really the most important decision we made for our soil. It really made a really big impact in the following 18 months, even when we tried to grow a couple more crops, that actually destocking was really important. Then of course you get complicated by management issues, but we were able to deal with those as well. And one of the great things, I suppose, an aside thing, is that you make a plan like that, you make a decision, you start asking people to help you in your decision making, in your planning process. You go to another area where you're challenged by different things. So the whole thing becomes just a continual learning exercise and an adaptive one. It was really interesting during my Nuffield. I actually spent some time in Copenhagen, actually, in the week of I managed to get there talk my way into doing some things. But anyway, I was at a very significant agricultural sort of meeting taking notes, and there was a minister who was the assistant to the Minister for Agriculture equivalent in California, and he got up and was, saying some very demonstrative things about climate change and agriculture and its role in it, and said, for example, we'll all end up like Australia, where agriculture has completely collapsed. And I thought, as I was busy typing, hang on, and this was in 2009, so I thought, hang on. So I happened to just see out of the corner of my eye, as I was fortunate enough, somebody with a microphone. I had 2 minutes, I think. I had 2 minutes to speak. I got up in front of all these people around the world and took a big, deep breath and said, we are adapting. We're farmers. I explained to them that we'd been in drought for a long time and we were going through an adaptive, and it was a continual process of adaptation. And we were still feeding our country, and we were still managing to export some food to the world, and sat down. The great thing about that was we had a conversation later, and he was a great gentleman, and he didn't want me to feel offended by that. But it's about people's perceptions, and it's about the conversations that you have with people. So to me, it was really important that I saw, or that Jack and I saw ourselves as being adaptive to our circumstances, and our farming system was being adaptive. We haven't been drawn into an organic production system at this point in time, but we're open to it, and we'll be looking at all the options we can. We're always looking to maximise our input costs, which were touched on earlier, and we'll do anything to try and look at that multi-layering of effect of not just looking at it from an input cost in the short term, but having a look at it as an input cost for the long term. So I think it's really the costs around inputs can sometimes be focused on products. And I actually think we need to spend more time focusing on systems. And that means we'll get long-term benefits in terms of our reduction of our input costs. In the short term, it might not be. Our soils, I think I've said there, require a delicate balance between those things that we're looking at, and I don't think that's any different to anybody else. We're also involved in the Southern Growers Group, which is a production-based group, and I think that's one of the things I wanted to just touch on briefly today. Probably my point that I would say is not so much what we're particularly doing on our farm or what we're trying to do on our farm or where we're heading to, but how we do it and how we talk about it. So groups, groups are really, really important to trying to have that exchange of information. And there's some things there that I just want to touch on groups. Sometimes they come together and they're driven by a passion, but that passion is often not sustainable, and the leadership within the group can sometimes not sustain it either. So these are some of the things that we're looking at to try and focus in on farming groups and how they're working. Encouraging the action, having a common goal, which is always important. The localisation, I think there's a concept that somebody said just recently that I heard where we talk about localism. Whether or not that's a new bantered word to be around, but I think that that's really important. The learning in those local situations can be often adopted in other regions, but it can really be built on and worked on locally. And of course, all of those things there are fairly self-evident. Andrew Hermiston's one of the farmers from a little bit further west from me, but I loved it when I was working with him with a recent project in something, and I thought I'd show you just a photo of some of his revegetation, which has been great work that's been done through the CMAs. But when I was talking to him about a recent award he won, he said that his vision, I loved his vision, I thought it was sort of suitable for the bugs in the conference, he wanted, his aim for his farm was having tree lines across the landscape with earthworms leaping from the soil. He's doing some great work. There's some farmers doing some great work. This is our place, and I suppose I talked a bit earlier about management. It's pretty flat, and it's pretty self-evident there that it is. But probably one of the things, we have minimum tillage, retained stubbles, direct drilling, and all those sort of conservation cropping processes are adopted where we are. We also do a bit of chemical fallowing, particularly during the drought. That was really important. The most important infrastructure project that we've done on our place in recent years has been the development of our drainage system. We did this through a project in conjunction with the land and water management plans in the Murray irrigation area, and it's been really, really important to our soils. The whole farm itself, it's based on a whole farm plan, and now we've got all of the paddocks laser levelled, and that can all drain, and we can get that water off. Although it was really interesting with the earlier slides about the runoff. We did find the runoff, even though the whole thing's intricately drained internally as well. It was terrific during the rain events this year, but it was slow. So we also like the water going into the ground on the way through as well. But that's part of it. We have a centralised dam that holds about 100 megalitres of water, which we've been able to access with off-allocation of water during the year as well. That's it just filling. That's part of the channel system. As you can see, you can't see, but it's all intricately involved, and every part of the farm now drains into this centralised point. Our stock containment areas were invaluable to our paddocks and how we were looking after them during the drought, and we did a lot of work there again through the Murray CMA. But for the sheep that we were running where we were at the times when early on, before we did a lot of our destocking, they've been terrific, and they've continued to be terrific. They're really now a very important part of our production process, and they've been developed properly and set up properly, and I think that's has been really important. My Nuffield Scholarship I'll just touch on as well, and in 2008 I applied for a Nuffield Scholarship, an agricultural scholarship. I wanted to understand a little bit about carbon accounting, and I suppose I was being fairly focused on it. I'd go and ask people, and people didn't really know much about it. So I applied for this Nuffield Scholarship and was successful, and it was probably a particular turning point in my life for my approach to understanding the issues around carbon, what I could refer to as the carbon sector. And it just threw me into the world of policy, it threw me into the world of soil biology, it threw me into science and researchers, agronomists, farmers, and I spent 16 weeks going around the world. Six of that, the first 6 of it was with a global focus program that Nuffield run, where you look at agriculture globally as a group. So I was set and found it quite confronting. I realised my little aim originally of going up and looking at carbon accounting was I suppose, a fairly simplistic view of the world. Little did I know that carbon was going to become the new buzzword, and everybody wanted to know about it, and we had a whole climate change issues. So my scope ended up being enormous. So ultimately my report dealt with the implications of carbon policy for Australian farmers and Australian agriculture. And I learnt a lot. I learnt a lot in that time, and I would encourage anybody else that is challenged by any particular aspect of agriculture, if they're a farmer, to apply for a Nuffield Scholarship and be challenged too. But I suppose what I learnt out of the whole thing, most of all, it's about communication. So it's about telling stories, it's about being able to share experiences, whether we do that locally, whether we do it in groups. It's about keeping the language simple. That's the most important thing I've learned in my time since writing my report, is having what I refer to as the carbon conversations. That includes talking to scientists and people that are dealing with carbon and soil biology at the microbial stages and that sort of stages that a lot of you are experts in. And it's also about being able to translate that information out into the field, out into the policy makers, so that people can make informed decisions. We have to have trust between the people. And again, I think even the conversations today and the presentations have shown me that it's not a them and us situation in this. It's the transitional stages that we need to go through in teaching each other to keep on adopting the practices and techniques and to be challenged by them and to learn from them. So that ultimately means we have to have some flexibility. We have to be able to get the information quickly and timely. So the researchers, to get the information out to us in the field in a language that we all understand, is really important. Again, adapting the science to the management systems. We can't. I found doing my Nuffield, the continual question that I went when I talked to people frequently was, "Can you please explain that to me again? I don't understand what you're talking about." And I kept on thinking, how would I go back to my neighbours and have to explain this actual piece of information, this piece of science, or this piece of research? And, I've even sat with scientists that have been discussing things particularly associated about carbon, and they genuinely want to actually be out there communicating with farmers. And the new carbon farming initiative and those sorts of programs that are going to be developed, we really need to understand for them to be successful in any sort of way. Keeping the cost of technology and the application affordable. I think somebody mentioned it today about testing. If we could get testing more affordable, more cheaper, more relevant, and the turnaround time quicker to our business, we would use it more and more. So to me, that's pretty important. And knowing that farmers can be working in the field and working with you side by side and have the respect. And I think that's really important to start linking up all of us together. And just my last comment, he can say it so much better than I can. Thank you very much for your time.